Is there a lever? There's a lever on the side underneath.
Oh, it's not. Oh, sure enough is. Okay.
You have to, there you go.
I wasn't mainly in like it. 6 o'clock.
Good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock p.m., and we will start our meeting this evening for February 20th, 2024 York City Council meeting. Up first, we have our public comment, and I have Mr. Franklin Williams.
Is the clock wrong, or are we starting early?
It needs another batteries.
It needs another battery, so do I. I'm Franklin Williams, still at 528 West Market Street, and still chairing your zoning hearing board just briefly. I want to say that we expect to be welcoming a new member, moving from alternate to regular membership next month. But we always like to have at least one alternate, and I usually tell them, don't get impatient, just keep your ears open and listen and your eyes open and watch, because before long somebody will move or croak, and I certainly don't plan to move, so and we'll see about the other one. Mainly, there's some things that have been in my mind for a month or two, and I know that seems like, with regard to some things, they'd be old and of little use, but I don't think in this case. I have a few comments about your rules and procedures. And it seems as though you like to hire consultants. Just think of me as a consultant on your rules and procedures who's willing to work for free. No $3.50 an hour for this one. And I do have some track record here. If I can read my own writing. The first thing I noticed this afternoon and wrote down was that appointment of a liaison to a department should also chair the corresponding committee. And then I found out when I turned a couple of pages, that's the way it's written. So I thought, well, maybe I'm on to something there. Should chair the corresponding committee and only one committee. I think they should be picked in the open, here, in public view, by the council. And the order to pick committee should rotate. So that I was never very impressed with seniority. I'm old enough to remember when the Congress of the United States was pretty much controlled by racist Southern Democrats by virtue of the fact that they were there the longest. And a lot of things that should have happened didn't happen until much later because of that. Committee meeting procedures. And this is a more complicated subject, and some of the things included in the in that Rule 5 regarding committees seem to me to be just a little bit ambiguous. I think we should both give that a little bit more study. But what I don't think needs more study is on the subject of disclosure of interest and abstention, rule number 3, which parts B and C are so matter of fact. A member with personal pecuniary interest on any question, etc., shall disclose the fact to counsel and shall not vote thereon. And Part C spells out what should happen if somebody did not disclose a personal, financial, or pecuniary interest. And no, they're not supposed to be shot at sunrise, but the council shall refer the matter to legal counsel for opinion and recommendation. So it is viewed pretty seriously. But Part B, no, that was Part B and C. Part A, I believe it is, any member of council who abstains from voting must first disclose the reason for abstention, and the abstention shall be approved or denied by at least 3 members of council. It makes absolutely no mention in that section of a personal or pecuniary interest. Any member of council who abstains from voting must first disclose the reason for abstention, and the abstention shall be approved or denied by at least 3 members of council. Now, in the case most recently bringing this to mind, Councilwoman Jonescu wished to abstain on voting for officers. When asked why, she said because she didn't feel that she knew people well enough to vote. In other words, she was saying, I don't feel I have enough information or I'm well enough informed. Well, isn't that something? That someone has the honesty to say that. And I'm not sure why that provision about that the reason to abstain must be approved or denied, I'm not sure I understand why it should come up for a vote. Frankly, you all seem grown up enough, responsible and mature enough, conscientious enough. I don't think we have to worry about an epidemic of abstentionism. I really don't. I wonder if Cameron Texter put that in there for some reason.
Franklin, I'm sorry, but as you've been up there 8 minutes, you know we have that 5-minute thing, so they gave you a little
Yep.
extra time. And if you call me, I can answer some of those questions for you, because some of it is like state law that, that we have to follow. So that's how
Okay.
come she couldn't abstain, just because she didn't have enough information.
Yeah, I got over the main points. I'm going to study the parts regarding how the committees are supposed to work. And if I think of any suggestions to make on them, I'll be back. Thank you.
Thank you, Franklin. Is there any other public comment? Okay. We will end our public comment section and we'll move along to our legislative meeting that I call to order. Madam Clerk, would you mind calling the roll?
Bub? Present. Jonescu?
Present.
Dennis?
Here.
Washington?
Here. And now may we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to all that are able to stand.
I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, all nations, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do we need to take any action on any of our previous meeting minutes from February 6, 2024?
None.
Okay. We don't have any presentations, awards, or announcements at this time. Our council committee meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, February the 28th, 6 o'clock p.m. here in council chambers. All agenda items are due by 12 noon on February 21st. Our next legislative meeting for council will be held Tuesday, March the 5th at 6 o'clock p.m. here in council chambers, and all agenda items are due by 12 noon on February the 28th. Moving into our final passages of bills and resolutions. Up first, we have final passage of Bill number 1.
Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
And that is Bill number 1, which was introduced by Queen of Washington at the February 6th meeting of council, amending the 2024 budget by appropriating additional revenue and expenditures for the tuberculosis program in the amount of $21,569,000. Did I say that right? $21,569. The HIV prevention program in the amount of $36,000, and for Act 12 and 315 funding in the amount of $53,888.64.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Madam Clerk, can you please call the vote?
Okay. You did that a little bit backwards, but that's okay. Bub?
Aye.
Hold on one second, folks.
Okay.
Okay, Bub, John Askew,
Aye.
Dennis,
Yes.
Washington.
Yes. And that motion carries. Moving along, the final passage of Bill number 2.
And is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Is there
Move to approve. I'm sorry.
Second.
Okay, and that was Bill number 2, which was introduced by Betsy Buckingham at the February 6th meeting of council, amending the 2024 budget for the Office of Information Technology by appropriating money not otherwise appropriated for other professional services from Fund 70 Internal Services in the amount of $315,000.
Are there any questions or comments from council?
None for me.
Any questions or comments from the public? Any questions or comments from administration? Okay. All in favor? Okay. And at this time, Madam Clerk, may you please call for a vote?
Bub,
Yes.
Johnny Skew,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Washington.
Yes. And that motion carries. Moving along to final passage of Bill number 3.
Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
That was Bill number 3, which was introduced by Betsy Buckingham at the February 6th meeting of council, amending the 2024 budget for the Human Relations Commission by appropriating money not otherwise appropriated for the Holiday Diversity Luncheon Fund 26 Special Projects account in the amount of $8,180.65.
Are there any comments or questions from council?
I just wanted to remind people, I learned this at the budget hearing, that Fund 26 Special Projects means that this is being not funded by tax dollars, that this luncheon is funded through donations. It just runs through the city budget process.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from council?
None.
Any comments or questions from the public? Any comments or questions from administration? Madam Clerk, may you please call the vote?
Bub,
Yes.
Johnny Skew,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Washington.
Yes. And that motion carries. Moving along to, we have no introduction of any new bills. Moving along to our new business. We have a resolution authorizing an agreement with Berry, Dunn, McNeil, and Parker LLC for consulting services related to grant development, administration, and management.
And that will be introduced by, you mind taking that one since Betsy's not here?
So introduced.
Okay, and that will be resolution number 17, introduced by Aquina Washington, whereas the city desires to enter into an agreement with Berry, Dunn, McNeil, and Parker for consulting services related to development, and whereas request for proposals process was held, and whereas ultimately Berry, Dunn, McNeil, Parker were determined to be the best selection, now therefore be it reserved that council hereby is approve an agreement for said services.
Move to approve.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions from council?
Yes. Last month, this past committee meeting was my very first one, so I did not have a chance to read the 50-page RFP, and I walked out of that committee meeting with a lot of questions and concerns about this proposal. So I'd like to just run through them, a summary. It's a little bit to unpack. I organized them in terms of either comments made during committee or actual comments in the resolution. The first, we've had various individuals over the years in a grant manager position. So I understand this. It came up during the NAACP forum. It's come up over and over. There's something askew in our talent acquisition process where we have a hard time. We have a vacancy and turnover rate. So, yes, bringing Berry Dunn in, to create this program might be a good idea, but at the end of the day, when they're done, if we haven't addressed this underlying issue, we're going to once again be unable to keep anyone in this position. According to salary.com, the pay for a grants manager is between $59,797 and $72,578, and Indeed.com placed a salary in New York for $53,334. I can't remember what was being offered the last time I saw it, available, but I really think, we'd be better to address the issue and hire someone that's available on day one. I'm not comfortable with bringing in consultants as a default when we can't staff a position. And the city does have an obligation to fill positions, to staff positions with appropriately credentialed people with qualifications to manage them. Okay, the second one, this is each department pretty much has their own person they contact for grant management. I wasn't sure what that meant. Does that mean we're already paying various consultants across the departments? If so, how much? And if we were to approve this thing, do they go away and it all gets consolidated under one? Again, there just wasn't a whole lot of information provided at the outset of this. From the resolution itself, determined by the selection committee to be the best choice to meet the needs of the city. That's Berry Dunn. So, what made them the best choice? I'm speaking to ROI. I'm speaking to deliverables. So there was very little information. I was looking and waiting for the data. All right, so what percentage of our revenue is grant funding? Has it increased? Has it decreased? How does it compare with other similar municipalities? And in the end, Berry Dunn, I read through this 50 pages, does and has done business in Pennsylvania. We're going to be, hiring an Aaron Crawford to be our, consultant. So what has been the experience of these other municipalities? Are they sending a 5%, a 10%? There's no deliverable on this, no return on investment noted or demonstrated or what we can expect. The attached agreement is to provide consulting services through December 31, 2024, with the option for 2 one-year extensions of the term. All right, there's no cap on this. There's no ceiling. There is nothing. This is a blank check. So, in the contract, it looks like we are paying for the services of Aaron Crawford, grants development and management staff. Through June, the hourly rate is $185. From July 2024 to June 25th, the rate is $190 an hour. The third year, this jumps to $195. But reading and here, all his work is double-checked by staff that's higher up. And their hourly rate begins, at the earliest and lowest level at $265, and by the time you get to the third year, we're up over $300 an hour. So at this point, the cost and benefits weren't made clear. we weren't giving any, this was a very vague, very, vague resolution. It was a very vague presentation, and I don't feel comfortable justifying this expense, especially since at the end of the day, if we haven't resolved our, issue with retaining qualified personnel, we're going to end up in the same boat.
Thank you, Councilwoman Janescu. Is there any other comments or questions from anyone else on council?
I would add that also, I think the contract didn't identify any caps, so it just had the salary rates, and it didn't identify which budget line it would tie to, and perhaps that would be a helpful addition so that we know, if it's tied to a certain budget line, then we know that might be the cap, but as it is now, we don't know that, or I don't know that.
Are there any other comments or questions from anyone else on council? No. Are there any comments or questions from the public?
I'll be briefer than somebody, I'm not sure who. When I heard the business administrator present this at your work session 2 or 3 weeks ago, I'm going to be honest, I was favorably impressed. I particularly liked the idea that we don't want these consultants, these experts to be here doing for us forever. We want them to teach us how to do it for ourselves. I was impressed with that. I really was. But as I did about the ARPA consultant, I think I have a little bit higher estimation of city staff, its competency and dedication, than you have of yourselves, or than they have of themselves. And I wondered, when somebody proposes a law against something, and I ask, has that ever happened? Have we ever had to return grant money because it was misspent? Maybe we have. Maybe we have. I can think of times when we probably should have been asked to, but I'm not sure we were. Everybody I talked to said that the ARPA was constructed to make it easy to use by school boards, school districts, municipalities, but we're not here about that. That's water over the proverbial dam. But a friend of mine said, I can't believe that they want council to approve this. At least when you brought the answer advisory forward, there was a cap on the spending. And I thought, well, they'll probably reach that, and I believe they did. I may be wrong, but I think they got close to it. But at least the cap was there. And I couldn't find one. And I read all 50-some pages of, now there were a few places where I kind of fast-forwarded past, the listing of all of the principals, the employees, and I started to get dizzy from the amounts, the figures, $350. I never made that much in a week, but for an hour. And then there was another question. Question one, did I miss somewhere, did I miss a cap on the possible cost of this? Question two, there was reference made somewhere to a rate multiplier, I think it was called. Never heard of it. So my roommate looked it up and Googled it, I guess, and it was pretty much what I told him I guessed it was, that if somebody's hourly rate is, let's say, $200 an hour, and they bill for 10 hours, that would be $2,000. But if there's a rate multiplier of 10%, that would make it $2,200. If any of you like auctions like I do, there's something called a buyer's premium. It means if you paid $10 for a chair, it's going to cost you $11. This is the same thing, very same idea. Those are my two basic questions. I can't imagine that you would push this right on through without a cap on how much it might cost for the remaining 10 months or so of this year. I can't imagine that.
Thank you, Franklin.
That's enough.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the public? Are there any comments or questions from administration?
Hello, good evening. I appreciate the questions and concerns that have come down the line regarding this contract for grant management services. Ultimately, we are looking to set up the connection and the partnership with somebody that we can go to. As Franklin mentioned, the initial plan is to build a program. Along the way, there has been, over the last couple years, since we haven't had someone on staff, that certain opportunities have come up to us that we have looked to explore, and it has fallen back on current city staff who may have experience with doing grants and may not, in order to explore those possibilities. And there's been plenty that we've just missed out on because we haven't had a resource to go to internally or externally to assist us with this. To address hiring, the last time we did look to bring someone into this position, it was before the residency requirement was removed. So once we have an actual, to recruit for somebody and tell them, we don't have a program in place, we need you to come in and build the program for us. We had a very difficult time finding the individual we had, and she had a very difficult time to pick up and go forth. Now, there was other issues with COVID and other things that came through, but that we realized was an issue, that we don't have a program in place that we could bring somebody with experience to kind of pick up and run with. That's where the thought came into place of, okay, well, we have been successful with Answer in terms of understanding how great it is to have a resource available to us where it's not just one person, but they have a team of people that would be able to assist us in any way that we need. Also, they're just specific knowledge to the ins and outs and the requirements of these grants. Now, obviously, it's been on the federal end, but even on the state and local, and how helpful that has been to us. The one difference, so to follow up with the hiring, is once we actually have a program in place that I can recruit somebody to come in who would be able to pick it up and go forward with it, I'm hoping that our residency requirement being expanded will open up to more possibilities than we've had in the past. So it's twofold. I can either take the time to try to find somebody who's exactly what we need to be able to come in and build a program for us. That, from what we've seen before, that's going to be difficult because that's more of a consultant level project as opposed to someone who's going to want to actually be an employee for an organization, especially for the long run. It very well may be someone that we come in and it's short term, great. If we get what we need out of it, then we have to look to replace somebody to come in afterwards. So that's where my goal is, to use the consultants as a tool for us to build a program internally that we will then be able to hire at least one member, if not more, to staff members in order to pick up and go forward with it. Let's see, what else was there? The cap. This is a true consultant contract in terms of we are paying them for the services that we request of them. And unlike Answer, where that was a project, that was a whole project that had a beginning and an end in terms of how long we knew we had the money available and the time in terms of when we wouldn't have ARPA money to even pay the consultant any longer. That was where an overall project cap of, I think, the $770,000 overall came into play. With this, there's going to be a couple things that will be prioritized with the consultants. First of all, if there's any emergent grant that we are looking to get an application in that needs immediate help, and as you said, we've had one essentially consultant who's been helping with the police grants. And then Fire has utilized a consultant specifically per grant that they have applied for. So ultimately, the goal is, yes, we would be able to very rarely need to use a consultant for specific grants because we're going to have a program in place and people who are knowledgeable enough to complete the process themselves. I'm not going to be opposed that we're not going to bring somebody in if it's, it's a fire-specific grant and there's an individual who has a high percentage rate of being able to award rate for it. We'll have to consider our budget and the administrative, overhead of getting that grant to see if that is the best choice for us. But ideally, the goal is that very rarely do we need to do that because we're going to have a program in place between the ins and outs of the individuals within our department and the person who's running it that we're going to make sure that we have our timing in place. A lot of things around here is we don't find out about things till last minute and then we're running to get things put together and information about that. And so want to be able to have somebody in place for that. So we very well may, I'm not going to say we're never going to have consultants ever again, and we definitely would still be utilizing those consultants until we're able to transition over the actual administration. And I am looking internally more than, okay, these Amanda, whoever in Florida, is going to be taking it over. No, because I know I'm paying Amanda by the hour. So I'm going to prioritize out what I want to ask them to do so that I know when I get the bill that I have the budget to pay for it. So no, there is no cap in there in terms of the overall project. It all depends on, besides what we're looking to build our program, it also is based on a per grant application. So it'll all depend on how many applications we're looking at. And every time a new application opportunity comes up, there's that new opportunity for a revenue source in order to pay for the services that we're getting from them. So it's not something that's a stagnant amount of money associated with this. But again, there's control in, they're not just coming in and free ranging. They're only going to end up doing what we request of them. And at this point, I'm requesting to make that connection so that we have them available. And trust me, I do not have the bandwidth at the moment to go running ahead with this and start charging up all the expenses because we just don't have that. So they're going to work with us slowly to get an understanding of what we need. What does a grant management program look like for a municipality like us, and work off of their suggestions of platform uses and the other resources that they suggest we need in order to have a program. And then if grant opportunities come up that we decide, yes, we want them to work on that, even if they're looking for grant opportunities, again, they're not going to be doing anything unless we've directed them to do that, and I'm not going to direct them to do that unless I know I have budget to pay for. At the moment, this would be paid out of the other professional services line item in business administration, which actually I only have so much money in there at this point to even get the project started, and I'm going to have to look for a budget amendment of either ARPA funds or a transfer somewhere to keep it going. So we do have a very limited budget at this point, but I want to be able to get this connection in place, which what this contract is. So yes, it has extensions, but it also has a 30-day window that we can tell them we don't need their services anymore at any point in time and only have to pay for what the work they've done at that point. So it's not like we're guaranteeing ourselves that we're going to pay them, $500,000 over so many years. We're not. It's actually more in our control in terms of how much we're going to spend with them based on what available budget we have or the other revenue opportunities associated with the work that they're doing. Let's see. I don't know. Was there anything else I missed?
I believe that's everything. Thank you, Ms. Administrator Robertson. Is there any other comments or questions?
So just listening, so that pretty much means it's going to be at an as-needed basis, correct? And that's why we're not really seeing a cap, because
Correct.
we may not need them all the time. I see the chart here and what it looks like, but if I understand, like when we don't have a long-term situation, more so when things arise and we actually need a consultant to come in, and it makes sense to bring them in.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
May I? I'm not sure how an intermittent consultant's going to succeed in building a program. That would be an issue right there. I mean, you're either making a commitment or you're not of a good amount of money to get it done. It's, it's not just, okay, we have one grant that needs to be written and they're going to come swooping in. If you're looking for them to build an entire program, that's a far greater commitment.
I think what Mrs. Robertson was saying was, as far as the person that will come in to help build a program, would probably be a little bit more long-term until that program is built, and then we can bring someone in to actually take over that program. And then as far as the different grants, they will be individuals that will come in as needed. And so that's two different things. Am I missing it?
It is, and I completely
correct.
agree. Yeah, I mean, to do it as efficiently as possible is that we're going to dedicate a period of time for this work with them to build the management system.
Right.
Unfortunately, the way, responsibilities and bandwidth and people here go, what we're going to do is it's going to be a combination of working with them with the internal people that we have to, first of all, being, okay, we're going to learn a lot from them, just like we did with Answer the first time that we, looked to spend some money after we've met with them in terms of the process. What do they look at? What are the checklists that we need? What are the forms that we need completed? So every time we actually do utilize them for their grant services, we're going to learn from them in terms of what they look for and how they're going. So yes, ideally, I'd love to be like, yep, I've got one person dedicated to working with them, and this is how much they've told us it's going to cost us to get this up and running. But unfortunately, that's not where we're at this point. But this is the first step in terms of having them available in order to get to the point I want to get to and into a self-ran grant program where we are getting and not missing opportunities for revenue to come in.
Thank you, Business Administrator Robertson.
So, thank you for all of that. As you're wanting to use them to help build the management program, what kind of time allotment are you budgeting for on a weekly basis or a monthly basis from them? Because that can give us an idea of what types of expenses you're planning for on a monthly basis. And I'm sorry, I don't have the budget in front of me. Do you recall what your other professional services budget is for the year? You said it's a little, it might be a little short, but do you know what that number is?
Yeah, 20,000.
So you have 20,000 right there now. And then when you think about using McNeil Dunn, what kind of hourly commitment or were you thinking about on a monthly basis from them to build?
Right. And that's what we liked about them initially was, we say, okay, if you're going to come in and this is what we're looking for, how do you go about doing that? And it's all based off of initially it's going to be a meeting to get to know us and get to know the people that are our key stakeholders. So I would imagine that we're going to have a couple hours up front in terms of building essentially what the priorities are and what we plan to and hope to get done between now and third quarter or the end of the year. From there, depending on what that plan is, then they will decide how often we should meet, who they're meeting with, when they're meeting with, and that's all on the approval of us. Like they're not going to be meeting with anybody or no one else is going to be meeting directly with them without that being part of the plan and being approved. So until we have that initial meeting with them so they really get a feel for where we are now, which, yeah, that's going to be a couple hours. It's going to be, a couple $100 initially that unfortunately they'll go so far in terms of getting to know us, in terms of being able to put their proposal in. But obviously there's some stuff that you can't get into the nitty gritty until you actually have a contract in place with somebody. And that's where initially it's going to come down to this is a contract that we wanted to be transparent with and we brought to council. But when it comes to the actual expected expenses, it's very well that we're not even going to reach the cap of the $68,000 in terms of council even needing to give the blessing for a contract of the such to have the mayor and the controller sign to go forward. But since this was it's important to what we're doing in business administration, and I think it's important for everyone to know what we're doing. That's why we elected to bring it in, because yes, there is no cap, so you can even see, like, should this even come to us or not? But it's kind of the safer than sorry method in terms of making sure everyone's in the loop and know what we're doing, that we are trying to move forward on this. And we went through a RFP process in order to determine, who out there can fulfill the needs that we have, which does meet the requirements for any contract over, $10,000. So we did check that off, and we're like, okay, let's, not knowing exactly how much we're going to be spending with them, then let's go ahead and bring it to council too, to make sure we get that covered.
Thank you. And correct me if I am wrong, Business Administrator Robertson, that once you have brought the consultant in, once they have successfully built the program, that the goal is to have staff trained, staff to be brought on board, and to continue the longevity of this project, and that we would not need to have a contract with them anymore.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm looking. I'm looking to have somebody that we've gone through a process of. They know what we ultimately want, what we ultimately need. They've been able to show us that they have the people and the experience in order to do what we need. We'll have them in place so that we can start chipping away that, yes, ultimately 2 years, we have a program that we can then open up and hopefully be able to get even more applicants than we were able to get before in order to pick it up and continue with the program. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions?
One quick question about the RFP process. Did you have any proposals submitted by people in York County specifically?
No, I think the closest we had was Maryland. We had somebody in Texas, I believe, and then somebody in Maryland. I think they had a connection to somebody up this way, but I don't think they were actually located in York.
Do you recall what the major, what might have made them less desirable than the
Sure. Yeah, we were looking for somebody that had a well-rounded staff that would be available to us when we needed them, and that we did have options in terms of, who would be working with us and how often. And that was a much more like, and also that knowing that they have other clients, that they would still have, enough people to be able to cater to us when we did need them. And the other proposal was essentially like a one-person show that I think they might have had another person they consulted with, but we just weren't comfortable that they were going to be able to provide us the level of service and had the experience to a larger level in terms of what our possible grants that we can come in or the ones that we already have. So that's why we went with Barry Dunn.
Do you have a list of grants or that you want them to go after this year? Is there already some basic list identified by anyone in administration to say we want to go after these?
No, not that I'm aware of. There's a couple that's floating around. There's a couple that I know that our current consultant is assisting permits with one at the moment. And that's where there's several opportunities where it's actually they're knocking on our door saying that they have money that's been allocated specifically for municipalities for this purpose, but we have to start the process. We have to start the initial application. We have to, go through the process. And then at this point, especially for something like permits where we don't usually reach out for grants for permits, that's where we do bring the consultant in to assist with that, to at least make sure we're getting the ins and outs. The other thing is that you have to go through PIMA's website, and we already have the consultant set up to be the main individual in order to go in there. So that's where like a central person is helpful, but if they're not internal, then we are limited in terms of what everyone else can work on. So that's where I just like definitely have her help us with it so we don't miss any of the deadlines and she can do the submission. So what we're doing ultimately with Barry Dunn is, okay, so she was able to step in and handle that, but if for some reason she wasn't, we need to have someone else that we can use to assist with this. And we are hoping that they are going to get to know our programs, and so they can know what to search for us as well. But no, there are no big grants that we're looking for. Essentially, it's like, what can you get for us? Now, I know there are some transportation grants. There's some things floating around that we definitely want to look into, but there's not any specific ones that is the running point. And actually, that's where, okay, first part, let's, get everyone on the same page in terms of what they're looking at and who they're looking at. Because at the moment it's the Public Works Director gets an email from somebody in PennDOT, and it may have come to me, it may not have. And so we need help getting ourselves organized, and that's what we're really hoping that they'll do for us.
Are there any other questions or comments?
Just one last one. If you've got $20,000 in the other professional services line and business administration, that technically is the cap. If no one, you would have to come back to spend more with them for their services over the 20.
Correct, unless specifically, say, permits is the one who is seeking their assistance. Again, they have a limited amount of other professional services that they have already budgeted out for other purposes, so they would have to identify specifically what expense that they had available in order to utilize them. I mean, they're gonna have to prove it to me in terms of being able to utilize them, because I'm like, I don't have the money for it, and that would go across the board. Ideally, yes, I'd like to come back for a budget adjustment that we would be able to cover, the first year of service with them, so that it would alleviate some of that from the departments and be able to centralize that overhead cost.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Bub,
Yes.
John Askew,
No.
Dennis,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes. That motion carries. Moving along, we have a resolution approving the preliminary and final subdivision plan submitted by Northern Gateway LLC for 244 to 252 North George Street to combine 4 parcels into one.
and that's yours for introduction.
So introduced.
And that is resolution number 18, introduced by Queen of Washington, whereas Northern Gateway submitted a preliminary final subdivision plan for preliminary final subdivision plans for the properties located at 244 through 252 North George Street to combine 4 parcels into one for future development of the site. And whereas the applicant have requested waivers to various subdivision and land development ordinances, and whereas the plans submitted are in accordance with the city's ordinances, and whereas the Planning Commission recommended approval, now therefore be it resolved, council hereby approves said plan.
Move to approve.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded. And do we have someone here in the public? Thank you.
Hello, Dylan Bauer, Royal Square, 29 South Duke Street. I'm not the public, I thought you were calling me up.
Yes, unless you had any other comments or questions regarding the project.
Presented,
Yes. I don't know if you had anything extra to add or any explanation on the project.
I can offer if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Yes.
As you know, this is the corner, the northwest corner of North George and West North Street. We've been at this project for 8 years, I think. And our last iteration is to consolidate into one building, and by the lot lines we have right now, it's just more conducive for us to be one single parcel. So that's why we're here.
Thank you. Do we have any comments or questions, any other comments or questions from the public? Any comments or questions from council?
None.
Actually, I'm sorry. Could you tell us what the plan is when you consolidate them into, can you share if you have a plan for what you're going to do with them when you consolidate them into one?
We're still trying to figure it out. I mean, it's, from a development standpoint, long-term, the best interest is to be one lot. We're not really sure we've been, like I said, at it for 8 years, trying everything, and there's a few grant requests out there that are probably not going to be enough. So we have a few ideas, but no, I can't really say much more than that.
Is demolition on the table or not?
Yeah, demolition is our last option. It's not what we want to see. Our company's built on restoring historic buildings in the city of York, and this is one of the oldest ones, so we continue to try. If the numbers there's a point where you just can't make sense of it. So we're going to keep trying, but ultimately, no matter what, whether it was a single building or what you see today, it's a development corner, and for that, we'd like it to be one parcel.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for all the good work you have done and
Oh, thank
trying
you.
so
We're
hard to
trying.
restore things. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan. Are there any other comments or questions from council?
None.
Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Bub,
Yes.
John Askew,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes, and that motion carries. Moving forward, we have a resolution approving the preliminary and final subdivision plan submitted by Clinton Industries for 525 East Market Street to replace a curb and sidewalk. So introduced.
and that is resolution number 19, introduced by Queen of Washington, whereas Clinton Industries submitted a waiver for a preliminary final subdivision and land development plans for the properties located at 525 East Market Street to replace curb and sidewalk on the Philadelphia Street entrance. And whereas the applicant is requesting waivers to various subdivision and land development ordinances, and whereas the plans and waivers submitted by the applicant are in accordance with the city's ordinances, and whereas the Planning Commission recommended approval of the plans, now therefore be it resolved that council hereby approves said plans.
Do we have anyone in the public representing this project? May you come forward, please?
Bradenball with Clinton.
Say the name again, I'm sorry.
Nick Bradenball,
B-R-A-N-D-E-N-B-A, no,
Bradenbaughh.
thank you.
Yeah.
And who are you with, I'm sorry?
Clinton Industries.
Okay, thank you.
And would you mind just giving a brief
Pretty much we're
synopsis?
looking at putting an addition onto the side of the building. When we went through land development or sit down with the planning commission, since everything was already paved and we had all the requirements in place, they said there was really no need for us to go in. They went out and did a site walk and asked us to redo the sidewalk on the Philadelphia Street side, which as I'm currently working on that project now. Hopefully, as soon as this gets passed, I can apply for our permit and get that project finished up on the sidewalk part. And then later on, we'll give you our plans and try to go through that process for the addition.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any comments or questions from anyone in the public? Any comments or questions from anyone on council?
None.
Any comments or questions from the administration? Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Bub,
Yes.
John Askew,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Washington,
Yes. And that motion carries. Moving along to our supplemental agenda, we have a resolution authorizing the filing of a BRIC grant, Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Program grant, in the amount of $107,200 with a $26,800 match for code enforcement activities and software. So introduced.
Is there a motion to waive Rule 215 to allow introduction of this bill? For the new council women, do you know what the Rule 215 is?
Is it,
Are you familiar? Rule 215, back in 1969, I believe it was, council passed resolution number 215, and that was that all items for agenda had to be submitted to council no later than the Saturday before the council meeting. So if something comes after the Saturday, you have to waive that provision to allow introduction of this resolution. And it has to be approved by 4 votes in order for it to be introduced. Okay? So is there a motion to waive Rule 215?
I make a motion to waive Rule 215.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, no. Okay, and that's resolution number 20, and that was introduced by Aquina Washington. Whereas the Bureau of Permits and Inspection under the Department of Econ Dev is looking to apply for a grant associated with the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities Program through FEMA on February 29th, and whereas the amount of the grant requested is $107,200 with a 25% match requirement of $26,800 and will be utilized to support code enforcement activities, including purchasing new software, and whereas the city will be responsible to reimburse FEMA for the government's share of expenditures found by BRIC to be ineligible. Now therefore be it resolved that council hereby authorizes the filing of an application for said funding.
Move to approve.
Second.
This has been moved and seconded. Do we have anyone in the public or any from administration for any further comments or questions regarding this?
I can just start out by saying that this is an example of where we were a couple meetings ago when we asked for forgiveness for not doing this process in terms of bringing all applications for grants that have a match must come to council per the ordinance for essentially the blessing to go ahead and submit the application and for the mayor or the controller to sign any associated documentation. So this is the example of how it should be done. Unfortunately, opportunities like this don't always come up in the timing that our committee meetings are scheduled. So unfortunately, finding out about this application, which was really just beginning of February, and determining that the initial application had to be submitted by the 29th was why this was kind of came to you separately as a request. So I appreciate you considering it. Past that, I believe the Deputy Director for Permits and Inspection, Steve Buffington, might be able to answer your question in terms of what he's looking to do with this money, if he's allowed to apply for it and get it.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I would say in my 40-plus years working with the city, this is the first time that anybody has knocked on our door and said, hey, we want to give you money for building code enforcement. This is a program by FEMA, channeled through PEMA, and back at the beginning of February, the representative from PEMA called and said, look, you guys need to apply for this grant. There's $2 million of the BRIC grant money set aside for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I have room. I'd like to see as many of the third-class cities as we can get some help with this. So consulted with him, went down through the list of the eligible activities. Some of the things that we'd like to do with this money is $5,000 set aside to start to digitize paper records, which is a big plus for us. We're to the point now where we're no longer accepting paper applications. We're doing everything electronic, but that doesn't give us access to the older files, so we'd like to start doing that. $5,000 set aside for training of code officials. I'm sure you're all aware that we recently brought the Uniform Construction Code enforcement activities completely back in-house. Well, primarily back in-house. We're still using the third-party consultant to finish up everything that they've started work on, and if we need them going forward, if our plan reviewer is out sick, if he's away on extended vacation, whatever, they are willing to stay on and help us with that. So that puts us in a good position there. Also, money set aside to hire a part-time code enforcement official to help with some of the Uniform Construction Code inspections. Right now, we're running a one-man band, and he's starting to already get filled up. So we don't want to chase him away like we did our last code official that we were using to do all that work. So we are planning on trying to build staff for that, and it is completely self-sustaining. Even at this point right now, we pretty much, we do sustain the whole Bureau. We're able to support the whole Bureau, so we want to keep it that way, and keeping the code enforcement activities in-house is the best bet we have. This grant is going to go a long way. Although it's only $107,000, it's still a good start to be able to keep this process in-house and to adequately staff it and train people so that we can also bring some of our property maintenance inspectors to a higher level of training and be able to help as well.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from anyone in the public? Any comments or questions from council?
I just want to say thank you pretty much for having a plan for the money.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
So just wanted to say thank you for your hard work and at least having some type of plan, even though it just came about, at least you have something in mind of what you want to do. And then what caught my attention is keeping it in-house. And thank you for that.
You're very welcome, and thank you for recognizing that.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Madam Clerk, can you please call the vote?
Bub,
Yes.
John Askew,
Yes.
Dennis,
Yes.
Washington.
Yes, and that motion carries. There are not any more requests for any future meetings. Are there any other comments from any council members? Okay. Any comments from administration? Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
You too.